WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Bamako. Good evening and welcome to Newslink, live on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. The Senegalese government publishes 4 draft laws from national consultations for wider debate. Malian Transitional Authority declares 2 days of national mourning following deadly weekend coordinated terrorist attacks. Nigeria's acting ambassador to South Africa assures protection of Nigerians living in the country despite recent xenophobic tensions.
We swung into action by holding a series of diplomatic engagement with the South African government.
And Guinean opposition party threatens election boycott over irregularities.
The Frontex calls on the relevant authorities to restore legality to the electoral process, ensure equal treatment of all candidates, and guarantee transparency and credibility.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Sankulu Jubril Janko.
Once again, many thanks for joining our broadcast this evening. We begin in Senegal. Our presidency has published several draft laws emerging from the national dialogue process. The proposed text outlined major political reforms, including a constitutional review and restructuring of the electoral system. Abdullah Hassan tells us more in this report.
4 draft laws emerging from the national dialogues held in 2024 on justice and in 2025 on political reforms are now open to the public. The text proposes major changes, including the creation of an independent constitutional court, the establishment of an autonomous electoral body, a revision of the electoral code, and the restructuring of political party regulations. According to the presidency, the draft reflects a synthesis of recommendations from nationwide consultations translated into legal text by expert and international committees. One key proposal is the new constitutional court made up of 9 members, including a vice president and 7 judges appointed for a single 6-year term. The president would appoint members, including 3 selected from a list proposed by the National Assembly. Authorities are now calling on political actors, civil society, legal experts and citizens to engage with the reforms and contribute to the debate. In a statement, the head of state, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, reaffirmed his commitment to dialogue and an inclusive reform process.
Abdullah Hassan filed that report. Elsewhere, Mali is observing 2 days of national mourning following the death of several people killed during the largest and coordinated attacks carried out by armed groups on Saturday. Malian Defense Minister General Sadio Camara was among those killed, according to government spokesperson Brigadier General Issa Ousmane Coulibaly. During the weekend attacks, insurgents stormed several cities, including Bamako, Sévaré, Gao, and Kidal. Critical state institutions and facilities such as the international airport and military barracks were also attacked. No official account has yet been published of casualties in both civilian and military ranks, but the army says 16 people sustained injuries. Meanwhile, the Azawad Liberation Front, a separatist movement in the northern Mali, says Russian fighters from the African Corps have withdrawn from Kidal following a negotiated agreement. In a statement issued Monday, the group confirmed that troops deployed alongside Malian forces are pulled out, with evacuation focusing mainly on wounded personnel and heavy equipment. But Africa Corps, in a message on Telegram, tells a different version of the story, claiming it thwarted an attempted coup in Bamako on Saturday. Imo Edel reports.
The alleged withdrawal of Africa Corps from Kidal appears to bolster the FLA's position, which claims it has taken control of the northern city since Saturday. However, elements of the Malian army are still inside Kidal, continuing to resist ongoing attacks, according to military sources. Despite the withdrawal, the Africa Corps insists it remains active elsewhere in the country, maintaining combat operations on other fronts. In a message broadcast Sunday on its Telegram channel, Africa Corps indicated that it had thwarted an attempted coup d'etat orchestrated by the Front for the Liberation of Azawad, FLA, and the Sahelian branch of Al-Qaeda. According to its version, between 10,000 and 12,000 fighters participated in the offensive launch against Bamako, Kati, Gao, Kidal, and Sevare, with the presidential palace, military garrisons, public administrations, and the national arsenal in Kati as the objectives. Africa Corps claims to have secured the presidential palace, maintained all strategic positions and airfields, and neutralized more than 1,000 jihadis and destroyed more than 100 vehicles. These claims are yet to be verified, with observers expressing mixed reactions about the effectiveness of their joint operation, wondering why attacks have surged in recent times despite their presence. For their part, Malian authorities have never officially acknowledged the presence of Russian mercenaries who were initially presented as trainers for the armed forces.
Imo Edet reporting there. Crossing over the Chad, no fewer than 40 people have been killed in fresh intercommunal clashes in the eastern region of the country. Officials say the violence erupted Saturday in the sub-prefecture of Gireda in Wadi Firazal province. The fighting was reportedly triggered by a dispute over access to water well. In response, several ministers, top local authorities, and the Army Chief of Staff have been deployed to the area. For years, Eastern Chad has faced recurring tensions between farmers and herders, increasingly worsened by the split over of violence from neighboring Sudan. According to the International Crisis Group, disputes over land and grazing rights have left more than 1,000 people dead and at least 2,000 injured between 2021 and 2024.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Well, more on security matters. At least 29 people have been killed in a suspected Boko Haram attack in Adamawa State, northeast Nigeria. Residents of Guyako community located in Gombe local government area of Adamawa say the attackers rather stormed a primary school on Sunday evening while a football match was underway, shooting sporadically at players and spectators. They also set several vehicles in nearby property ablaze before being repelled by security forces. Sources say the violence has forced hundreds of residents to flee to nearby communities over fear of further attacks. However, Governor Ahmadu Umaru Fintiri, who visited the scene, pledged stronger measures to protect lives and property, while commending security agencies for their swift response. Well, meanwhile, Nigeria's acting ambassador to South Africa has assured that Nigerians living in the country are not under siege despite recent xenophobic tensions. Their assurance comes amid reports of attacks on foreign nationals in parts of South Africa. Correspondent Yechunu Sasset reports.
Acting Nigerian ambassador to South Africa, Temitope Ajayi, says the situation is currently under control, with both Nigerian and South African authorities working to ensure the safety of citizens. He notes that while there have been incidents of violence, they are isolated and not targeted specifically at Nigerians.
We had that incident precisely on the 14th of March, and we came out to debunk it, that it was not a coronation, it was not an installation of any such, it was just a gathering of people trying to celebrate their culture. But of course, the optics was misunderstood, and that is why we swung into action by holding a series of diplomatic engagement with the South African government.
This comes against a backdrop of renewed concerns over xenophobia following viral videos showing hostility towards African migrants and fresh threats calling on foreigners, including Nigerians and Ghanaians, to leave South Africa. The ambassador explains that the priority for both governments is to protect all residents, including foreigners, and prevent further escalation.
And the government has come out to make its position known. And also, Nigerian government, you could see that our foreign minister came out after that incident to issue a statement, which the mission as well has issued a statement to clarify the situation and to say that this is not what it was perceived to be.
Meanwhile, authorities have urged Nigerians in South Africa to remain cautious and follow safety advisories as efforts continue to maintain calm. The situation is said to be relatively stable in major cities, including Pretoria and Johannesburg. For WADR, Yechenu Sasitu in Abuja.
In Liberia, pressure is mounting on the government to deliver justice for victims of the civil war as rights groups intensify calls for accountability. The demands come from the Transitional Justice Working Group and the Independent National Human Rights Commission following the continued discovery of more than 300 mass graves and over 150,000 massacre sites. At a memorial event for victims at Dupo Road, advocates expressed frustration over delayed establishing a war crimes court, warning that decades of inaction and alleged political interference are undermining the country's quest for justice. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Ibrahim Packer reports.
Chairman of the Transitional Justice Working Group, Jean Sesaki, emphasized that while Liberia mourns the loss of its people, there is mounting anger over the government's failure to deliver justice for the victims. He pointed out to the recent inaction by the Ministry of Justice and the government's slow response to crucial demands from the Consolidated Religious Group of Liberia.
Our main message is on those that are charged with responsibility to bring pride and dignity. We are calling on the Liberian government to act and bring justice and accountability to those who carry on this gruesome act.
At the same ceremony, INHRC Chairman Denster Brown said the discovery of 321 mass graves and 151 massacred sites highlights the scale of civil war atrocities and the urgent need for a war crimes court, first proposed in the early 2000s but yet to be realized. However, tensions are mounting, with some stakeholders alleging deliberate delays for political reasons. Meanwhile, Executive Director of the Office for the Establishment of the World and Economic Crimes Code, Jala Bapu, has accused the Justice Minister of frustrating efforts to operationalize the code.
Is it the minister's responsibility to do a technical review in the absence and without the knowledge of our office? We are confused. Up to this point, the minister has never engaged, never informed us of any technical review.
The call for a war crimes court in Liberia has been a long-standing issue since the end of the Civil War in 2003. Despite repeated promises from various governments, the court has now materialized, leading to frustration among victims' families, activists, and the broader public. For Newslink on WADR, Ibrahim Packer, Monrovia.
In Conakry, the opposition Democratic Front of Guinea, led by former Minister Abdoulaye Yoro is raising concerns weeks ahead of the legislative and local elections. At a press briefing, the party denounced what it describes as serious irregularities in preparations for the local elections, including the rejection of all its candidate lists without notification within the legal time frame or any official justification. Francis Boniface has the details.
The Democratic Front of Guinea, FRONDEG, says the situation is worrying and could undermine the transparency of the votes. In response to what it calls a clear violation of electoral rules, Abdoulaye Yero Balde has not ruled out withdrawing his party entirely from the electoral process, while confirming that the matter has been referred to the courts. During the briefing, Abdoulaye Yero Balde painted a bleak picture of preparations for the elections. According to the runner-up in the last presidential election, several dysfunctions are affecting the transparency and fairness of the process.
There are numerous irregularities in the legislative and local elections. Following a thorough review of the preparatory phase, the FRONDEG denounces serious issues likely to undermine the integrity of the process. These include the unjustified rejection of its municipal candidate list. The FRONDEG submitted candidates in several constituencies, but none were accepted in the provisional list, and no reasons have been provided. These shortcomings constitute a serious violation of the Electoral Code.
The FRONDEG leader says these practices could undermine the credibility of the vote and is calling for strict adherence to the electoral laws. He has also threatened to withdraw from the electoral process.
The FRONDEG calls on the relevant authorities to restore legality to the electoral process, ensure equal treatment of all candidates, and guarantee transparency and credibility. Failing prompt corrective action, the FRONDEG reserves all the right to take all necessary political measures, including withdrawing from the ongoing electoral process.
While awaiting a court ruling, Frontex says it will maintain pressure and is urging the relevant authorities to ensure transparent and inclusive elections to avoid a political crisis.
A report by WDR's Conakry correspondent Cherno Alpha Ibrahim Balder, presented by Francis Boniface. You're listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM, online at wadr.org and across social media platforms at WADR English. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Senegalese government publishes 4 draft laws from national consultations for wider debate. Malian Transitional Authority declares 2 days of national mourning following deadly weekend coordinated terrorist attacks. Nigeria's acting ambassador to South Africa assures protection of Nigerians living in the country despite recent xenophobic tensions. And Guinean opposition party threatens election boycott over irregularities. Still ahead in the news, we have press review, guest interview, and sport news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Concerns are emerging over electoral integrity in the Gambia after the Electoral Commission reported more than 2,000 cases of double voter registration during an ongoing nationwide exercise. The Independent Electoral Commission says it is also dealing with operational challenges, even as turnout remains steady. Analysts and civil society groups warn that how these issues are handled could be critical to maintaining public trust in the country's democratic process. WDR's Banjul correspondent Sang Donald Mendy completes the story.
At voter registration centers across the Gambia, citizens continue to turn up in steady numbers to secure their voter cards ahead of future elections. For many, including Sebastian Mendes Chagas, it is about having a say in how the country is governed.
I want to choose my leader who will help my community and my country.
But while the process has largely been smooth, officials say challenges remain. Ali Kamara is an IEC official.
Some of the time you will see people will queue after at the end. If you ask them questions, they will tell you that I have voted. If you ask them where is the voter's card, they say it's at home.
Recently, the Commission has flagged over 2,000 cases of double registration despite repeated warnings that the practice is an offense under electoral law. Ibrahim Esba is chairman of the Advocacy for Gambia Democracy and Civil Rights.
I don't think this is anything healthy in the preparation of our 2026 presidential election.
Political analyst Yorumbalo says even limited irregularities, if not properly managed, could undermine confidence in the electoral system.
A credible election needs a clean, verifiable one. Definitely the verifiable role needs to be there. This is what makes it, credible.
Meanwhile, the Electoral Commission says measures are in place to detect and prevent such practices. The supplementary voter registration exercise, which began on 8 April, is scheduled to run until 21st May 2026. For now, the focus is not just on registration numbers, but on whether the process remains credible in the eyes of voters. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Sangdola Mendy, reporting from Banjul.
Let's take you back to the Sahel, precisely Burkina Faso, where the city of Bobo Dioulasso has since Saturday been hosting the 22nd edition of the National Culture Week. For 1 week, thousands of people from across the country and beyond will experience Burkinabe culture. It is a vibrant celebration of color and sound, with Ghana as the guest of honor. Vernick Jai has the details.
A lively atmosphere fills the Sangole Lamizana Stadium in Bobo Dioulasso, in front of thousands of spectators. Some 200 artists, including musicians, acrobats, performers and dancers, alongside a storyteller and a singer, take turns presenting different performances. It marks the opening of the 22nd edition of the National Culture Week. The Cultural Biennale runs from April 25th to May 2nd. Here is the Minister in charge of Culture, Gilbert Wedrago.
Bringing together the Burkinabe cultural community in all its diversity, capturing national attention and showcasing the richness of our heritage, all while hosting this cultural biennale in such a context is neither insignificant nor by chance.
The event is expected to bring together about 750,000 festival goers in the country's economic capital under the theme Culture, Youth and the Transmission transmission of social values.
It calls on us to reflect on our responsibility to the youth, not just as beneficiaries, but as key actors in preserving and transmitting culture. Beyond words, we must pass on values, a shared memory, and the strong sense of living together.
Throughout the week, troops from across the country will compete in various categories, showcasing their talents. The 22nd edition of the National Culture Week has Ghana as guest of honor and Russia as special guests.
Ogodugu correspondent Martin Keba's report, voiced by Veronique Njai.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
48 hours after the deadly coordinated terrorist attack in Mali that claimed the lives of several civilian and military officers, including the Defense Minister, General Sergio Camara, questions remain unanswered. In addition to that, there is a growing concern about the wider implication of these rising attacks in the Sahel region as pressure mounts for increased protection of lives and properties. To help unpack and understand the circumstances of the unprecedented event is Dr. Ojewale, a senior researcher and analyst from the International Institute for Security Studies, Africa Bureau.
Well, I think it speaks to the growing threats and how armed groups, generally speaking, separatist groups and terrorists are also copying their bigger franchises outside Africa. And I'm talking about Al-Qaeda, Islamic State. I think they are also reading from the playbook and they are seeing what their counterpart and collaborators are doing in other theaters like the Middle East. Because it draws from what happens in Syria, in which they were able to topple governments, Afghanistan, and I think they want to replicate the same thing in Central Sahel, which most reports point the fact that it has become the global headquarters of these groups in the recent time. They've become emboldened, and I think they've taken it to the next level now, particularly with the killing of the Minister for Defense in Mali, and which goes to show that we are living in a very precarious time in the region.
You rightly mentioned that even the defense minister of Mali was killed in this attack, and this begs for an answer. Among them, what are some of the reasons responsible for the security breach?
We can't really say for now, but I think it's quite obvious that the military apparatus has become extremely overwhelming in the recent time. Don't forget that Mali is a vast land, and if you look at security response in the recent time, I think the strategy on the part of military is to actually consolidate on power in Bamako. Seems to be the only city that is still standing through security reinforcement. Security is quite thin and government is completely absent in many places. And since 2012 and even before 2012, the northern Mali has been a very strong base for the separatist groups. It has, if you look at event of the last 3 years, since 2023 in particular, and I think we've spoken about these on your platform as well, in which we've seen the falling of Kida and the state taking it back and falling again and the state taking it back. So it has become episodic. Why we might want to point in the direction of intelligence failure or whatever, I think it goes beyond that. It's the fact that the group were able to create a point of convergence between the separatist group and the terrorist groups, and the leverage on the vast presence and the geographical spread of their cells to be able to carry this out. Largely what we've seen in most places in West Africa and countries that are challenged is that in many instances we have only seen state responding after the deed has been done, not really a proactive response. And it speaks to the fact that these people have replicated a lot of cells that they can quickly activate within a very short period. And it also built on the emboldened stance that they've taken in the recent time, strangulating Bamako, cutting it from energy supply in September last year that linger even up to maybe sometimes early this year. We've also seen the intervention on the part of the Yehi. We've also seen bracing attack on strategic infrastructure like the airport, military bases. So I think they are realizing that they can probably push beyond their regular boundaries in terms of what has been a concentrated rural attack to be taking on strategic infrastructure, not just in cities generally, but in strategic cities that actually host government, host military bases and political power.
Well, with Bamako remaining about the most strategic capital still standing, which according to you is due to security reinforcement, is Mali a failing or a fallen state?
Well, I think it's rather a failing state. It has not fallen, and it is very, very unlikely that it will fall because, and it depends on how we describe as fall now. As long as the military can still consolidate power, resist such armed groups within Bamako, then the state is still standing, even though it might be standing on a wobbled leg. Well, not just to talk about what is not working. I think I will also commend the military response yesterday, particularly in Bamako. Of course, the report from Kida is not encouraging. They've taken over government lodge as far as we've seen. And it speaks to the fact that I think the military government is trying to retain Bamako as the last bastion in terms of political consolidation and maybe regime protection as well. But largely, I think things are becoming fast overwhelming for state in Central Sahel now. And it speaks to what I am convinced should be the solution. Is the fact that irrespective of their political ideology, military government versus democracy, they need to realize that they have a common enemy. Because what happens in Mali, in Bamako, in Kida, does not stay in those places. It has a wider Sahelian African effect that requires cross-border security cooperation like never before. It means they need to continue to collaborate and talk to one another. On the part of the AES alliance and on the part of ECOWAS, must actually find a suitable compromise to work together for the greater good of West Africa and this security of lives and property, which is the primary and cardinal objective of government, irrespective of any form that it takes.
Dr. Ojewale is a senior researcher and analyst from International Institute for Security Studies Africa Bureau. Well, in sports, Ghana has been confirmed as the host of the 2027 Africa Under-20 Championship. The announcement was made by Coach Okrako, who described the decision as a proud moment for the country. Elsewhere, the Confederation of African Football, CAF, has unveiled a $715,000 prize pool for the upcoming Under-17 Africa Cup of Nations, boosting incentives for youth teams across the continent. The winners will earn $125,000, while the runners-up will take home $90,000. Semi-finalists will receive each $60,000 and quarter-finalists $50,000. We've come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa, the Macross Radio broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. And many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maud Juve for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. I am Sankula Jibril Janko. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.